There are nearly 8 million high school students participating in athletics, more than 460,000 NCAA student athletes who compete in 24 sports year after year, over 4,000 athletes in the NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB. And let's not forget about all the athletes in the minor leagues, soccer players from around the world, fighters, Olympians, and more, playing on stages of all sizes. Training every day to become the best. However, not every moment of an athlete's life is a highlight.
It was enjoyable, but at times it was very hard and it became stressful.
If they asked for a break, they would be out for the game.
It's pretty cutthroat.
It becomes less of like fun, and then it becomes like more of like a job.
Being a student athlete there caused me a lot of stress.
Did lose a lot of sleep sometimes. I was sometimes stressed.
Athletes are often consumed by pressure, high expectations, and the opinions of others.
They're waking up at 5:30 to train before they even go to school. Then they go to a day long, of school and homework and everything. Then they go and they have to train in the evening and afternoon. And you'd like to say, oh my God, isn't that awesome? That is, boy, I wish my kid or I wish my athletes were that driven. And yet what you're probably finding is underneath all that is a tremendous amount of anxiety that drives the compulsivity that happens to be channeled into their sport.
Seeing them often in the spotlight causes us to forget that athletes are humans with emotions and feelings like everyone else. Extreme presumptions that are put on athletes can lead to mental health illnesses.
It was a pressure and like, you're not going to play at this level, or you're not strong enough to compete with these girls, and I wasn't, like physically I wasn't strong enough, but I did become stronger. But the pressure was too much on, you need to look this way, you need to be this way, or else you're not going to play.
As a result, individuals can resort to isolation, drugs, alcohol, and can experience anxiety, depression, and eating disorders.
A lot of eating disorders, and that kind of comes with the perfectionism and that significant drive and very individual focus.
I also had a teammate who did have an eating disorder playing basketball, and her father would tell her she can't compete at this level because she's too skinny. And she would just start crying after games. So you did really bad in this game because you're too skinny, because you have an eating disorder. The effect of the little girl, to hear that message from her father.
What if I told you that 1 in 5 adults have a mental health condition? That 56% of American adults with a mental illness did not receive treatment? What if I told you that the rates of youth depression jumped from 8.5% in 2011 to 11.1% in 2014? What if I told you that suicide was the 3rd leading cause of death among student athletes from 2004 to 2008? Throughout the history of sports, mental health illnesses have played a huge role, dating back to legends such as Jerry West, who suffered from depression and described it as the single most difficult thing he's had to deal with in his life, despite the money and the fame. Terry Bradshaw, 4-time Super Bowl winner, was diagnosed with clinical depression in 1999. Darryl Strawberry, 4-time World Series champion, turned to cocaine and alcohol as a result of depression. 2-time Stanley Cup winner Stéphane Richer was another athlete who came forward about his depression and stated he wished he could have talked about it in his early 20s, but at the time it was seen unpopular. Even today, athletes go through difficulties and experience mental struggles. Larry Sanders, who played for the Milwaukee Bucks, left the NBA to find his true purpose in life after experiencing a lot of stress and pressure through work. Rick Rippon, most noted for his time with the Vancouver Canucks, chose to commit suicide at the age of 27 because of depression. Dominant tennis player Serena Williams suffers from depression as a result of high expectations and knee injuries. Even someone who wears muscle and a smile 24/7, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has experienced depression through periods of his life. The Rock stated on an episode of Oprah's Masterclass that he wished he had someone to tell him it's gonna be okay, it'll be okay. And that is the point of this documentary, to illustrate to you the expectations that are put on athletes and how those pressures affect individuals in ways that may prevent them from seeking help. Here are some of the struggles athletes experience.
Sharing your feelings, it makes you vulnerable. And that's the last thing you want when you're in competition.
Some cultures are a little bit more expressive and a little bit more outwardly. It's more permissive for them for people to be more expressive of their feelings, to cry, to laugh, to hug, to show affection, whereas others that would be a taboo. So you might find it more difficult to get someone from a culture where you have to be more reserved and you can't show your feelings, otherwise you're showing either you're showing weakness or you're burdening that other person.
The type of person that's really private, so I'm not gonna really tell anybody what's bothering me. Like, I like to kind of hold things in, which is not really a good thing.
Well, I'll tell you, physically, if you're not there, then it starts to impact your mental. There was a couple points, specifically one I can remember, where I got injured, and to be out of practice and out of games and limping to class, it was tough.
I think people kind of prioritize a physical injury more than a mental injury because they aren't necessarily exposed to how athletes or individuals are treated as whole individuals and not just human bodies that are walking around.
So what I noticed that when I first came into the field was that the clear majority of clients that anybody would see in their practice were women. And the reason I believe, and was told to me, but I believe was true, is that it's certainly more allowable in our culture for women to express vulnerability and to express feelings, whereas men, gosh, if you did that, you were showing some sign of not being a man.
There isn't this realization how much mental game is involved when you're playing a sport, no matter what the sport is.
Yeah, like I'm gonna have a shitty practice right now, like I just, something really horrible just happened in my life. I'm sorry, I can't pretend like everything's okay.
Because I don't want people to pass judgment, look at me any type of way, say that I'm not mentally tough.
Often athletes put we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Countless times where it's strenuous on your mental, and not just, that's not even physical, but mentally you have to really be strong as a person, as a man. I mean, you kind of have to grow up earlier because you have to take a lot of responsibility and accountability for yourself and what you're doing and making the proper decisions to maintain a GPA, to not do something, to not make a mistake outside of the classroom, on campus, because you're representing yourself, your family, your school, so there's a lot of pressure. Pressure usually leads to stress.
It's all about your mental focus. If you aren't on your game, if you're not, in the pool, or if you're not on the court, where you need to be, your game is off, and that's because of how you're feeling.
Unfortunately, my coach, Skip Prosser, God rest his soul, he had passed away from a sudden heart attack.
Amongst other things, but a lot of it was stress related, and the stress from my coaches or just from what the school needed from me just wasn't appropriate in the setting of being a student.
If you struck out, if you missed a catch, if you didn't use two hands, if you didn't make it to base on time, it was all on you. It was kind of that mental part of it. So that stress of trying to deal with it yourself without having to bring your other teammates down when they had their turn to be kind of solo up at bat.
I definitely think that's a fear that a lot of student athletes go through, is my coach can't know what's going on in my personal life because they're going to think differently of me and they're not going to play me.
Mentally, it was a lot for me. I was down there and, I kind of had I wouldn't say a breakdown, but it was close to that. I felt like I was alone. I really didn't know what to do at that time.
A lot of people hide their emotions behind curtains or try to cover up for going out to practice, and then once they get back to go into their dorm room, going back to the house, that's when they break down, and then they just hide their emotions because they don't think that if opening up to someone will really help, or opening up to a healthcare provider will show that they're weak or something like that.
You don't necessarily think about your mental health all the time. A lot of the time that's put on the back burner to everything else, and you find yourself somewhere that you didn't think you were going to be.
I don't want to say that they don't care. It's just not the first thing on their mind to tailor to, you know, a player's mental needs.
So beyond stigma, it might actually be a shortage of people who are qualified to help with this population. And that's not just someone with clinical training, but also with an appreciation for what the athlete's world is like.
Got very tough in mid-October before we actually started playing, and I had a death in my family away from home.
It's a lot of people saying things and nitpicking at things.
It was just so much stress coming to me from levels of like school, and then from like meeting new people, and then the stress of being away from home, you know, being around people that you don't know, being around people that you don't know if you can trust, you know, and at the same time you have to perform and you have to play the sport that, you know, is so demanding, and your scholarship is on the line, and there's just so many various things like, am I going to play? Does my coach like me? There's just so many questions that pop into your head, but at the same time you have so many other things going on.
It's a tough transition coming from high school to college, you know, being an 18-year-old kid and taking on, you know, the full course load, and then they have to balance practice. You know, it's a lot to take on. So it can affect you mentally. It can be very overwhelming, the whole transition.
If you look at performance, a lot of times what gets in the way of performance is anxiety, and whether it's a social anxiety or a fear of failing, that makes them more doubtful of their ability, even though quite clearly in practices or when they study and they're with a couple of friends from the class and they're able to understand and answer all those questions, suddenly they sit down to take the test, and because they're anxious, they go through the fight or flight response, and they kind of get this blank screen, you know, the paper is blank, they can't even read the darn question, because anxiety has taken over, and they're now fearing for their lives, metaphorically speaking, but from a biological perspective, they're actually experiencing the same degree of adrenaline and this overload, this stress overload that hits a person whose life is in true danger. So it's a perception of threat that triggers that fight or flight response.
I hope that people start to see it differently and start to think about the psychology of the sport is not just tied to a game, it's tied to the person, you know, and like how much that can influence your performance.
Complications and unexpected tragedies can happen to anyone at any time. But in order to deal with such troublesome times, it's important to express acceptance of coming forward with one's feelings, showing sympathy and compassion for one another, understanding that you can still be mentally tough even when seeking help.
The proportion of males to females that I have in my practice are close to 50-50, which is really encouraging, and really even more so with younger men, that they're more, perhaps they're part of a newer culture where they're saying, you know what, it's cool that, you know, psychology is more of a household term.
That it's really the opposite. When you're able to show your emotions, you're able to talk about your feelings, like that's a sign of strength.
Looking for help or reaching out to someone actually shows a kind of, I think it shows a strength that an individual recognizes that they want help.
To have kind of the courage to open up and be able to communicate and talk like that and express your feelings is a sign of strength.
I like to check up on them and just figure out if they're taking care of everything they need to take care of, because I know what it was like to be in their shoes.
Anything I can do to offer assistance, you know, and then from there, I'm all open arms.
It was kind of a release to be around people that weren't always surrounded by athletics. Say that helped me a lot. Yeah.
Expressing yourself is necessary and important.
I like to think of myself as a resource for kids or adults, you know, professionals that I do work with. So I always lend out a helping hand. Hey, if you need anything from me, let me know. If you need to talk to myself or one of the other staff members that we have, let us know. If you need a mental break, let us know, because that happens.
So I think that it's much more likely that you or anybody that you know somebody, if you haven't personally been to a therapist, know somebody who has, and so therefore it's not as crazy.
And then if you can make some sort of connection and make some sort of reframe or sort of relate to it in some way, it sort of brings down that fear or that anxiety, that worry, you know, and then actually recognizing that, oh, well, this isn't so weird and I'm not crazy.
Kind of like a shoulder to lean on. If they have issues like that, they should feel comfortable coming to me and, you know, relying on me to give them, you know, proper advice in those situations.
I mean, we're all human beings.
You're not a weaker or inferior for sharing your feelings, so that definitely helped me a ton, especially my senior year when I'm dealing with some deaths in my family, dealing with, you know, some of the stresses of not only being a captain and, you know, trying to achieve a goal, but trying to graduate, and on top of that, what am I going to do after?
Tell people what's going on, because the longer you keep it in and you don't talk about it, the worse it's going to get. People are there for you. So definitely remember that physical and mental health they're both equally important.
It is important to always be mentally in tune.
You know, we just want to get to know them inside and out.
I see more and more coaches being more, you know, they're more enlightened about mental health.
I will completely work with them to help them achieve whatever they want to find out, or refer them to the right healthcare provider.
What we try to do as coaches is we try to build a strong personal bond with each kid.
We're out there. People like myself, I was you know, a high school and college athlete. I'm a black belt in karate. So I have other experiences that I bring with me as a performer that helps me appreciate what the athlete's going for, and I think that's why I've been sought out.
The world that we live in now, it's best to open up about different stuff that's going on in your life and, you know, get the proper help.
Have a laugh. You know, sometimes you just need to have a laugh with someone.
Honestly, if I can tell you guys anything, it's definitely remember that there are people around you that care about you, and you need to remember that it's not weak to ask for help or reach out.
Efforts are being made to show athletes that it is acceptable to reach out and seek help for whatever may be struggling them mentally. NBA's Michelle Roberts has made it clear that mental health is going to be taken as a higher priority, and the league is expected to feature extensive procedures that will assist players with mental health challenges. Retired NBA player Adonal Foyle has spent his time away from basketball earning a graduate degree in sports psychology, becoming a mental skills consultant. Foyle hopes that mental health issues will soon no longer be viewed through a negative lens. The NFL also has numerous ways to help deal with mental health difficulties. There is the Critical Response Team, NFL Lifeline, NFL's Players Assistance and Counseling Services Program, the Bridge to Success Program, and the NFL Player Care Foundation, all which are available to NFL players past and present, and to their families as well. Even NBA champion Ron Artest had this to say.
I definitely want to thank my doctor, Dr. Sandy, my psychiatrist. She really helped me relax a lot. Thank you so much. It's so difficult to play. There's so much commotion going on in the playoffs, and she helped me relax. I thank you so much.
Lastly, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson tweeted to his followers that the hardest thing sometimes is asking for help. He encouraged his fans to have faith, and that on the other side of your pain is something good. I hope this documentary has done just that, given you the knowledge and understanding that you're not alone, provided you with enough comfort and confidence to speak up, passed on enough inspiration to believe that there is light at the end of every dark tunnel.